What is up, boyos, and welcome to Last Week in Games, where everything is video games. And I just want to say, normally I post the show on Monday, right? Post the show on Monday, we'll talk about last week's news, you know what I mean? That's the whole point of the show. But today I'm posting it on a Tuesday, mainly because normally, like, over the weekend is when I record the show and put together the show, and I got kind of sick this weekend. I'm still a little sick right now, as you could probably tell by my voice. But I really wanted to talk about one piece of news that dropped last week, and it is about The Last of Us Factions Online being canceled by Naughty Dog. So I think we're just going to spend some time to talk about that. We also have some NPD numbers for November, so like the best-selling games of the month of November. So I also wanted to talk about that as well. So maybe a shorter episode, maybe not a shorter episode, because I have a lot to say about The Last of Us. So let's just dive into it. So as most of you have probably heard by now, The Last of Us Online has been officially canceled by Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog did release a statement on their website, which I'm going to read here in just a second. But I just want to preface it by saying I am such a massive fan of The Last of Us Factions that was in the first game. And when The Last of Us Part 2 was announced, I was very excited for the prospects of a Last of Us Factions 2. And honestly, when it came to The Last of Us Factions 2, I wasn't expecting too much. I was just expecting another Naughty Dog Online, right? Like, Naughty Dog has a history of doing online games with the Uncharted games, and then, of course, with The Last of Us. So I was just expecting another one of those, and then when the game came out, they said, hey, we have been working on an online title, but it's so big that it's going to be its own thing. I was like, that's great. And as the years went on, I got more and more apprehensive about the state of The Last of Us Online. I figured when they said, it's going to be a little bit before the addition of The Last of Us Online comes, I just sort of figured it would be a couple months for them to like finish up whatever they were doing. I never expected it to be this like massive like games as a service that I think it ended up turning into. And I mean, you could go back to any of our old content back when Nick was doing the show with me. Almost every time there was some sort of show where we were doing predictions, we would predict The Last of Us Factions. The Last of Us Factions, it was our like most hyped thing. And, when I heard Sony was leaning into the games as service sort of thing, I wasn't excited, to be honest, because I just don't think that's what Sony's been good at. I think what Sony's been great at is making these single player games that no other company can make, because they can afford to take like a hit when it comes to sales, because ultimately they're trying to sell consoles. So if you have this like big hitter like The Last of Us Part 2 or Spider-Man 2 or God of War or whatever it is, it may not actually hit the sales number that, like, if Ubisoft made The Last of Us, they may need to hit different sales marks than, if Naughty Dog makes it, because they're also taking into account that people are going to buy consoles for that game. Now, this was something that, like, sort of got me a little interested in the idea of Sony making these games as service, because a lot of these games as service, and just to be frank, are, you get in there and it feels like a gambling website, you feel like you're being taken advantage of, and, there might be some fun to be had in some of these games, but, that fun is interrupted by, enter your credit card here. And I really was like, well, maybe Sony, since they're more about like, hey, let's sell consoles, they could take a more standoffish approach when it comes to games as service, do a battle pass, but, it doesn't need to make as much money as, a Division or something like that. So when I started to think of it from that perspective, I was like, oh, The Last of Us Factions could end up being like one of the best multiplayer games. That sounds very interesting to me. Obviously you've got the foundation of The Last of Us Part 2's gameplay there, and you had Neil Druckmann coming out at Key 3 last year, Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest, and just sort of hyping it up like, hey, this thing is great. I've also seen developers online saying like, hey, we've made something really special here. Before I get any further, I guess let's read the statement from Naughty Dog over at their website. This comes from naughtydog.com. An update on The Last of Us Online. We realize many of you have been anticipating news around the project that we've been calling The Last of Us Online. There's no easy way to say this. We've made the incredibly difficult decision to stop development on that game. We know this news will be tough for many, especially the dedicated Last of Us factions community who have been following our multiplayer admissions ardently. We're equally crushed at the studio as we were looking forward to putting it in your hands. We wanted to share with you some background of how we came to the decision. The multiplayer team has been in pre-production with this game since we were working on The Last of Us Part 2, crafting an experience we felt was unique and had tremendous potential. As the multiplayer team iterated on their concept of The Last of Us Online during this time, their vision crystallized. The gameplay got more refined and satisfying, and we were enthusiastic about the direction in which we were headed. In ramping up to full production, the massive scope of our ambition became clear. To release and support The Last of Us Online, we'd have to put all our studio resources behind supporting post-launch content for years to come, severely impacting development on future single-player games. So, we had two paths in front of us. Become a solely live service game studio, or continue to focus on single-player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage. We are immensely proud of everyone at the studio that touched this project. The learnings and investments in technology from this game will carry into how we develop our projects and will be invaluable in the direction we are headed as a studio. We have more than one ambitious brand new single player game that we're working on here at Naughty Dog, and we cannot wait to share more about what comes next when we're ready. Until then, we're incredibly thankful to our community for your support throughout the years. I'm going to be honest, it's incredibly hard not to be frustrated at this statement. I know just a few months ago or weeks ago, we got the news that there were a ton of layoffs over at Naughty Dog. We also got the report that they were scaling back the team that we're working on The Last of Us Online. So this did almost feel inevitable that this was coming. But what really frustrates me about this statement is just the fact that they say, we continue to focus on single player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage, just ignoring the fact that they do also have a heritage of online games, with games like, Uncharted 2 and 3 and 4 and The Last of Us Factions, which all had online modes. And now we're just pretending those things never existed. And it's also just frustrating the fact that they're like, we'd have to refocus our entire studio to support this game, when really that's not what any of us really wanted or needed to enjoy this game. Like we used to live in a world where an online game could come out and it could have a life cycle and it would, be there for like a year and then have its dedicated fans for the following few years, but that was pretty much it. And it just seems those days are done, which is unfortunate because I think that's all we really needed out of this. And to not just release what you guys have worked on, I have to say, like, this is no hate towards the developers at all. I think a lot of them were pushing for this, and I think this really comes down to the heads at Naughty Dog and the heads at Sony. And I think they see a massive online game and they think, hey, we have to make this Fortnite. Hey, we have to make this Destiny, when that just isn't the case. And you could release a game that has this, ambitious new way of doing online, and it could be groundbreaking. And then you could build a team around that and continue to have Naughty Dog do its thing. You're Sony. You could definitely build a new studio around this game if it turned out to be a huge success. I think going into it, with the idea that it was going to be a huge success and that you were going to support it nonstop it's a fool's errand. And we've seen it a million times in these online games with like Anthem. If Anthem just came out and had like an online mode and was also like a single player thing, I don't think people would have been that mad about it. It's the fact that they developed the game for it to be a live service game forever. I think of a game like Outriders, right? Outriders was a game that came out a couple years ago. People really liked it. And when they came out with it, they just flat out said like, hey, this is just going to have like 1 or 2 expansions and we're done with it. We're moving on. It's an online game. And that's what we plan on doing with it. And then we plan on moving on to the next thing. And I don't know why Naughty Dog couldn't do that. Even if that wasn't their initial idea with the game, like, hey, our initial idea was to support it nonstop. And as we've gotten closer, we've realized that it's just not feasible. They still could have just released it as something, or they could have taken the gameplay from it and pared it down and made it an add-on for the new Last of Us Remastered that's coming out in February. All that hard work that the developers put in just seems like a shame. And I have to point this out too. This decision was ultimately made because Sony bought Bungie. And Bungie is the quote-unquote experts at making a live service game, even though they aren't hitting their profit margins. They've barely been profitable since they've started. Obviously, huge successful game, and I won't take that away from them. I've put many hours into the original Destiny as well, but I think the Bungie guys came in and said, hey, this won't be profitable because it doesn't have our systems. It doesn't have our way of nickel and diming the consumer. And I think Naughty Dog knew that, and I think Naughty Dog was thinking, well, yeah, we're doing our own thing. We're trying to make our own game. And it just sucks that every online game is the same fucking game. We can't have anything new. And the one company that maybe we could see something new in the online space, because let's face it, the online space sucks. No online game is really that fun anymore. In between every match, they're trying to get your fucking credit card. Gameplay comes second. And it seems like this game, gameplay didn't come second. It seems like gameplay came first, and they were worried about how they could profit off of that. And it's just a goddamn shame that you could buy Bungie, a team that's been flip-flopping between fucking Xbox and Activision and now Sony, and, they can tell your flagship studio, which is fucking Naughty Dog, that, hey, your game isn't working. That's just insane to me. And also, I think the rules are totally different when it comes to developing a game for the PS5 versus a team like Activision, which Bungie was under, which has to make profits nonstop because they're not also selling consoles. And a game like The Last of Us Online could have brought in a huge amount of players to your console. And this is just, it's so saddening. And it's also just saddening to see a bunch of people I respect online, games journalists and stuff, just sort of being like, yeah, this was a good call. So now they can go on and make, more fucking single player games. And it's like, why not both? And the reason it's not both is because they wanted The Last of Us Online to either make a gajillion dollars and be a nonstop earnings game, or nothing, when it didn't have to be that. It could have just been factions too. It could have just been factions again. And we still could have gotten whatever Naughty Dog is working on as far as single player games. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen them work on multiple titles at once. While they were making The Last of Us, the original Last of Us, they were also making Uncharted 4 at the same time. So I don't know why one team couldn't go on and make the next big Naughty Dog game, while another team is making The Last of Us Factions. And if if Factions was like such a huge, massive success, you could turn that into its own dedicated team, keep hiring people instead of firing fucking people like you guys always do. even though your profits are up a gajillion dollars. And then you could have three teams at Naughty Dogs, two teams working on single players and another team that is just dedicated to the Last of Us factions. I mean, we already heard that that's kind of how it was developed. I mean, Neil Druckmann said in an interview that he really had no involvement in the Last of Us faction. So ultimately, I just think this is it goes without saying, like, it's just a shame. It's just a shame that we'll never get this game. Much respect to the developers for being ambitious. I think they were ambitious and just wanted to make a really good Last of Us Factions 2, and then Sony pushed them into this games as service thing because Sony, a couple years ago said they wanted to push into the games as service. And I have to say, like, if your flagship fucking studio can't get a games as service to work for you, I think this games as service stream that Sony has is dead. It's dead. Like, they have to give it up, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. We'll see with Helldivers. I think Helldivers will be great, but Helldivers was always an online game, and it suits that sort of environment. But I can't help but feel like Bungie came in and fucked this game. That is what they were hired to do. They were hired to come in and look at the financials of these games and say, hey, this isn't going to work or this is going to work. But Naughty Dog have always been innovators. And I think sometimes you just have to take a risk. And if you're going to take a risk on Naughty Dog. Like, what? Now, I do want to say, they may have looked at this and said, hey, we don't want to have a Fallout 76 situation, which I think Fallout 76 came out and ruined Bethesda's reputation forever, and I don't think they've ever recovered from that. I think Naughty Dog was like, well, we don't want to have to deal with the reputation hit that this could cause if it comes out and it's not great. But for me, it not coming out is just as much of a reputation hit to them. This is just as bad, or worse, because you were promising something really interesting and fresh and new within a space that has been pretty stagnant, making a lot of money for a lot of companies, but it's been pretty stagnant, which is the live service space, online gaming. Remember back in the day when you could play an online game and part of the game was leveling up and unlocking the cosmetics? That was the game, was leveling up, unlocking the cosmetics, and then you unlocked everything and Bob's your uncle, you move on to the next game. Like, that's how it was back in the day. And it was fulfilling and it was fun. Now you play to watch a bar go up, which earns you nothing. And if you want different cosmetics or, different forms of currency within the game, you have to spend real world money, which is not fun. And I think Naughty Dog could have, flipped that on its head a little bit. And maybe I'm just like wanting too much from what Naughty Dog was doing. Maybe this game would have not been that. Maybe it would have not been fun. But I just can't imagine a game with the gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2, which was so fun, not being great. And it feels weird to say this after the year we've had, which we've had a lot of great games. Baldur's Gate 3 was incredible. Legend of Zelda was great. Spider-Man 2 was great, but I'm hating the state in which video games are in, which video games have always been money hungry. Like, that's always been the point of video games, but I feel like there used to be like a little bit of respect for the player. Like, we're building this for the player because we're also players and we want to build something fun. And now it's just, we have to build something that would probably work just as well in Vegas. To just shiny lights, pull the lever, and give us your money, and maybe you'll get a cool skin. And that's just where I think the state of online games are, which is why I just don't play them much these days. Which is a shame, because I used to love online games. I used to love playing them with my friends, but the games just aren't fun. And what games are fun? It's games like Lethal Company, which have no preconceived notions of like, hey, spend all this money and then you can have fun. It's like, no, you just spend the $15 and you're just in there having fun with your friends. Or, Among Us was a massive hit, which was just built by a small team. Same thing. I mean, hell, even Fortnite was just like a game that was built as something completely different than it turned into. And they're like, hey, wouldn't it be fun if this was like a battle royale? And they did it. Rocket League, same thing. Like, hey, wouldn't it be fun if you were just cars and you hit a ball into a net? Like, that's just fun. And so many games aren't like that. Now it's like, all right, how about we use this model, which, it's a battle pass, and if you get to this point, you get this cool skin, this cool skin, this cool skin. And then someone in the back is like, right, but what about the gameplay? And they're like, oh, we'll worry about that tomorrow. Okay, we'll worry about that tomorrow. We're working out the marketing and how to make money right now. And that's just how I feel online games are for a lot of them now. And it's a fucking shame. And it's just sad, man. Anyway, let's move into the MPD numbers for the month of November, which is now called Circana. It's no longer called MPD. It's called Circana. These are the top 10 games of November 2023. At number 1 was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. At number 2 was Marvel's Spider-Man 2. At number 3 was Hogwarts Legacy. Climbing back up. At number 4 was Madden NFL 24. At number 5 was Super Mario Bros. Wonder. At number 6 was EA Sports FC 24. At number 7 was Super Mario RPG. At number 8 was Mortal Kombat 1. At number 9 was NBA 2K24. And at number 10 was UFC 5. So even with all the backlash, Modern Warfare 3, still the best-selling game. People just want to play Call of Duty, whatever. People have this like nostalgic thing with Call of Duty, and the gunplay is good in Call of Duty, so people keep playing it, Here are the 2023 year-to-date ending in November top 10 games. At number 1 still is Hogwarts Legacy. At number 2 is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, which couldn't take down Hogwarts Legacy. That game must have sold a shit ton of copies. At number 3 is The Legend of Zelda Tears for the Kingdom. It is worth mentioning that Nintendo does not release its digital sales, so it could be higher for all we know. Also very impressive for it to be up there considering it's only on one console versus Hogwarts and Call of Duty being on, Nintendo Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation, and PC, where Zelda is just on the Switch, At number 4 is Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Same thing as Zelda, like impressive it's up here considering it's only on the PS5, which it's not even on the PS4, which has a huge install base. At number 5 is Madden NFL 24. At number 6 is Diablo 6. At number 7, did I say Diablo 6? I mean Diablo 4. At number 7 is Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. At number 8 is Star Wars Jedi Survivor. At number 9 is Mortal Kombat 1. And at number 10, just squeaking in there, is Starfield. So next month we'll find out what the best-selling games of the year are, which I think is going to be pretty interesting considering Starfield is right there at the bottom, and I wonder if it's going to squeak on to the top 10 of last year or not. Also interesting that Baldur's Gate is not on here at all. I don't know what that's about. Maybe they just don't track the digital sales of that. I don't know. Maybe it'll get on there next month. I don't know. We'll see. So anyway, that's the show. I'm sick as a dog. I'm going to stop recording now and edit this, post it, and go to sleep. But I really appreciate you guys checking out the video. It's kind of a depressing one. I also have like sick brain and don't know what the fuck I'm saying. So maybe it made no sense, but I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next week.